Thank you, Music Ferdinand and Sheikh. Thank you for joining in. Uh, Ade, thank you for joining in. Thank you, Esther, for joining in. And if you just joining in, just share so we have many people joining us. And thank you for having the opportunity to join. Hi, Tabby Lauren. If you just join in, just share so that we have many people joining us. We have some good discussion. Chill, thank you for joining in. From Texas, that's great. If you just join in, share so that we have many people to join us. I have this music on my Facebook. You can watch it live too as well. Oh, thanks, Phoebe. This music that is singing is on my Facebook. Understand the meaning rather than just the music because it gives a good historical background. Greetings from Texas. Thank you so much. And if you just join, just share so we have people. You can always get me live on YouTube. You can get me live on Facebook. You can get me live on Twitter account. So either way, you will get me live, and we have a lot of things to talk about. And once more, share so that we have many people to join us. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. If you just tune in, just indicate where you are. I know many of you has indicated some are in Texas, some and I don't know if there is anybody in Europe, anybody in Ground Zero, anybody in La Republique, and anybody in Europe. Wherever you are, just indicate. And thank you again for taking off your time to be able to join me this morning. And once again, I want to take a moment to thank all of you. And if you just join in, just share so that we have many people to join us. And you can always get me live on YouTube, Facebook, and on Twitter. So either or you will be seeing me. Thank you so much. And if you just join in, just share so we have many people to join us. And thank you again so much. My name is Fonton Daniel. You are host speaking here live from the great state of Texas. Thank you. And another thing you can also do, you can also go to my my YouTube account. You can always subscribe and get my YouTube account. And you can always Google me, Funton Daniel. Uh, and you go to my YouTube page, you always get all the information that you need. And once again, my name is Funton Daniel. I will be speaking here live here in the great state of Texas. And if you just joining me and have Nicole Lamy, thank you. And also share so that we have many people joining us. And thank you again for taking off your time and be able to join me. And I have greetings from Texas. Yes, AK greetings from Texas. Yes. And thank you so much for taking off your time to be able to watch. And we have a lot of things to discuss. And once more again, do we have anybody from Europe? Nobody from Europe? I guess there's still maybe we'll be getting somebody from Europe too. And if you are in Europe, just indicate that you're from Europe. And if you are in Russia, I know last time we have somebody from Russia, somebody from Poland, somebody from Finland, and somebody from anyway. And I want to take a moment to thank you again, and somebody from China, and thank you again for take off your time and able to join in. It's a great, wonderful having you here. Um, uh, all right. Uh, anyway, and let me see who else again. We have Nicole, and who else? And Oh, we have what else? What else? What else? What else? Anyway, and I want to take a moment to thank you for taking your time to able to join me. And there was some nice music that was going on here. And if you have a moment to just listen to that music, it gives you some kind of background, history 101. It gives you some kind of history 101. Although it is in French content, but it's history 101. Oh, yeah. Amba from Russia. I know that Russia, nobody is sleeping in Russia. I know I must get somebody from Russia. All right, thanks you for coming out, and I'm sure you must be freezing in that area because they said people in Russia they're roaming around ice. I don't know how I could describe it, but I don't know how you're surviving in the ice in Russia. But anyway, thank you for taking the opportunity to join us live, and and who else again? I know the Choma from Russia. I know you guys are swimming on ice, but I don't know how somebody's going to be swimming on ice, but I guess you have to because, well, they said the temperature is minus something, minus 24. Minus 24. Then I can imagine you must be swimming on ice. But anyway, thank you so much for taking your time to join us live here. I'm speaking here from the great state of Texas. Today I will be talking about the Federal Republic of Ambazonia, the southern Cameroon territory that has been invaded and occupied by La Republique. It is that's one of our major focus. Many people they believe that Southern Cameroon territory is a colonial territory of La Republique and therefore under the control and French authority. Many people. Before let me start and let me give you this historical background. You can understand what I am talking about. It is in French, but it has a very good historical background, and that is. And I also have the music on my YouTube, on my Facebook, and on my YouTube. You can also go there and listen, take listen. Except you don't have idea about French, but at least you have the broken French that you can understand exactly the historical history 101 from this music. Because when I am speaking about the Southern Cameroon democracy, how democracy prevailed in the Southern Cameroon territory, it wasn't in the French Republic. And that is why this music gives you history 101 of La République. That there was never a democracy in La République because the French authority were busy murdering the people of this La République. And that is why they still haven't realized that the era has long gone. And they have seen Southern Cameroon as an area they will start murdering. And that is why I bring up this music to give you historical facts about what happened when the French authority were murdering the people of Bamileke and the people of the Bassas because they were aspiring to win the potential if there was any election organized by the French authority. And so that is why they bounded the UPC. And that is what this music is giving historical fact about those backgrounds. And we will be talking more. And I want to take a moment to thank you for joining me live. And if you're just joining me, just share so that we have many people to join us. And thank you again. And this is Fulton Daniel. I will be speaking here from the great state of Texas. Thank you, Elizabeth, for joining us. And if you just join in, just share so that we'll have many people to join us. And I want to take a moment to thank all of you that have taken the opportunity to join me live. And here again, my name is Funton Daniel. I will be speaking here live from the great state of Texas. And I will be speaking about a lot of issues affecting the African continent. And once more again, thank you again for taking off your time to be able to join. Today, before I proceed, I want to take a moment to thank the United States government. I want to take a moment to thank the President of the United States. I want to take a moment to thank all the governors of the United States. I want to take a moment to thank the Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson. I want to take a moment to thank U.S. Department of Defense. I want to take a moment to thank U.S. Justice Department. I want to take a moment to thank U.S. Permanent Representative to the United Nations, Nikki Haley. And I want to take a moment to thank all these United States members of government. I want to take a moment to thank the U.S. Congress. And I want to take a moment to thank the United States Senate. This is a very important body. This important body helps maintain a democracy to prevail in and around the world. Many nations are rising. Many nations are practicing democracy because they are ameliorate this sound democracy of the United States government, and many people are wish to have this form of government, and that is why you see many nations are enumerate those examples. I want to take a moment to thank the United States Governors Associations for recognizing the president of Ghana. The president of Ghana is doing a fabulous job, and he's doing an excellent job to see that not only economic prosperity of the people of Ghana, but he is also ensured that the rule of law prevail in the Ghanaian nations. And he's doing a fabulous job, and I want to thank African leaders that they need to look for this sample. They need to enumerate this example of leadership, and that when you embrace democracy, it's a way to preserve the identity of the rest of the world. Because many of these brutal dictatorships, they believe that their power were given to them by God, and therefore no one has the authority to question them. And mostly it prevailed in the French territory, that the French that were the territory that were colonized by France. And France implanted this fear and instructed massive killing because they have a certain individual that they implanted in African continent to ensure that all resources are diverted to the French authority. And they make sure that they deploy their military wing to ensure that liberty of the people are suppressed and to ensure that the French hegemony continue to prevail in Africa. And that is why you may have seen, or you may have read about the incident that happened in Nigeria, when the people of Algeria rise against the French authority, when the people of Ivory Coast, and they still haven't been free. There is continued chaotic scene going on in Ivory Coast. So, and Congo, all those areas that have been affected are still because of the French policy. France has never set up and liberate the African continent. France is more interested in its personal interest. And you will agree with me that historically, France has always been behind destruction of many nations. France has never maintained a transparent, pluralistic, allowed country to function. That is why when German unification knew that the independence of Germany cannot be accomplished with France present. And so that is why the architect of German unification, Otto von Bismarck was a strong architect of the German unifications because France sees Germany as a rival nation. And so therefore, to accomplish German unification, they need to get rid of France. And that is why, subsequently, you realize that many nations that arise and become a strong nation today must have fought 1 or 2 wars with the French. And that is why they have been free. And now the problem has transferred to Africa, where Africa become now the next hegemony of France. And that destruction of African continent is being carried out, orchestrated by the French military. You may not have seen, I know many images are being shown here for people talking about the crumbling of Africa. It is because of the French that are orchestrated machinery and destruction of the African continent. And that is why many of those images are not shown. And that is why I just want to bring this attention to the fellow American, because they understand exactly what I am coming from. American is a very, if you look at, many people might talk about America. America's policy in the rest of the world is provide a sound democracy. After the Japan invasion, thrown the bomb here in the United States, there was a series of wars that the United States fought against the Japan. But United States government did not ignore Japan. United States government rebuilt Japan. And Japan is one of the prosperous nations now because of the sound economic policy instituted by the United States. And that is why Japan is still strong. And even in Germany, after the defeat of the German, the West Germany was well developed because of the American policy. America did not go there just to invade. America did not go there to fight war. America went there because there was destruction going on in Germany. And therefore, when the war was defeated, United States maintained a strong, powerful policy. And today, Germany is one of the strongest economic power in Europe. And when you look at the French is more of a destructive force in the entire world. French is more of a destructive in the entire continent of Africa. As I'm speaking, many of them are not stable because French, rather than promoting democracy in the African continent, France is carrying on a destructive, planting individual, and France never promote a sound and meaningful democracy. And that is why you see many of these nations are rising. And I am speaking of Southern Cameroon. I don't care much about La Republic because that is part that is embracing the French policy. But I am speaking about the Southern Cameroon because that is where I was born. And that is the territory that I am presenting. Because Southern Cameroon was never a colonial territory of France. And therefore, any French sending their troops into the Southern Cameroon will be regarding unfriendly manifestations. France should concentrate on France. No African travel to France without a visa. The fact that they claim to be a colonial territory, they can manipulate. They don't show love for Africans. They don't. France doesn't show love. Despite the fact that they have 13 or how many colonies in Africa, none has a visa free to France. But yet France claim that they are the masters. You know, there is a contrast difference between the British colonial policy and the French policy. And that is why I have explained most of this in detail in any of my video if you have been following all my live video. You know, the music that I presented in the background, I have it a copy on my Facebook. The reason I present that music because it gives exactly historical background of what happened to the Southern Cameroon territory. So it is very, very unfortunate, you know. When the United Nations after the Germans were defeated, the United Nations mandated that all the territories that were under the Allied force control should be prepared for immediate sovereign independence. That was Article 76 Bill of the United Nations. That Article 76 Bill allowed them to form a allowed them to prepare them for eventual independence. While the British were building a sound democracy in the Southern Cameroon territory. The French were busy murdering the people. That is why the music of the background echoes some of the leaders of the La République that were being murdered by the French. Because first of all, the party that was had the potential to win an election in the party that had the potential to win an election. Sorry for that. Listen. Um, the party that had the potential to win an election, the leaders were being murdered by the French authority. And that is why when I post some of the images, you see at the time they present a human head, indicate that the person was killed. And that when each head of a particular community or leaders were murdered, the head was chopped off. When the leader's head was chopped up, you know, they used the head and present it as a showing that of victory. You remember the guillotine that occurred in French revolutions. The guillotine that occurred in the French Revolution. That was exactly what was implemented in the UPC's era by the French. So humans, just hold on. Sorry for that interruption. There are so many phone calls calling, you know. Anyway, so as I was speaking, in the French guillotine, humans' heads were chopped off. And this form of brutal evil was carried on by the French authority in their civil war. But in this application, what applied in La République, where many leaders' heads were chopped off and were present their head as a means of a victory. And that's why many Bamilekes and many Basals were brutally murdered. So this history was never presented because the history of La République were never presented to the school to understand exactly what the French did. So they ignore and distort the reality. And so that is why I am presenting this case, because the Southern Cameroon were more of a democratic society. They were more of an elected officials. They respect a sound democracy following the British rule. The British applied this important democracy in the Southern Cameroon territory. And that is why I am asking the United Nations. The United Nations is sitting up on a document that's supposed to allow the Southern Cameroon as a sovereign nation. I post this information everywhere. The United Nations General Assembly, Resolution 1608-XV of 21st April 1961, recognized the sovereignty of Southern Cameroon as a sovereign nation. And United Nations General Assembly that was meeting in 21st of April 1961 voted for the sovereignty of the Southern Cameroon as a sovereign nation. And before this resolution were voted, Southern Cameroon has exhibited meaningful and sound democracy, where there is an elected officials. First, it was Dr. Endele that was elected the first prime minister of the Southern Cameroon. And later on, John Gufforja was elected as the second prime minister of Southern Cameroon. He formed his cabinet, and his cabinet was in line with the United Nations regulations of the rule of democracy as a prerequisite for a sovereign nation. But La Republic has never exercised. Oh Lord. Do not call me until I call you back. Thank you. Do not call me until I call you back. I said I will call you back. Don't call me. When you see people like Issa Shiruma was the one that was involved in a coup d'etat against La Republique. That's the person that is standing to talk about the sovereignty of Southern Cameroon, that knows nothing related to the political and historical factual information about the Southern Cameroon. When Issa Shiruma standing and talking about the Southern Cameroon and describing the Southern Cameroon as a terrorist, and I'm kind of wondering who is Issa Shiruma. That was the person that was orchestrating the coup d'etat that was organized against Paul Biya when he just ascended into power. So he's so clean now, and he ignored the history because the historical factual informations were never taught in school. And so that is why people like Issa Shiruma will come out and describe the Southern Cameroon as a terrorist. Southern Cameroon is a sovereign nation that is recognized by the United Nations. And United Nations, because of bribing and corruption, is the order of the day. Bribing and corruption. The United Nations office here in the United States has deviated from the fundamental principles of its duty to protect human shield as the way of maintain way forward. United Nations is no longer a United Nations that we talk about, because when in the 1950s and the 60s, when they were talking about reorganization of the Africa, or those territories that were defeated by that the Allied forces were under the controlship, many of these territories, United Nations were more proactive. United Nations were investigate exactly to ensure that peace and stability were maintained. As I'm speaking, there is about 50 to 60,000 Southern Cameroon that are currently in Nigeria. There are about 50 to 60,000 of Southern Cameroon refugees that are languishing in Nigeria. United Nations office here in the United States hasn't in any moment trying to call for a General Assembly to discuss the crisis. That was the purpose of the United Nations, to maintain peace and security. But instead, the United Nations fiscally here in the United States, I am delegate this power that the governor of New York to investigate whether United Nations is working according to the policy that was entitled to. I am asking the United States government to investigate whether United Nations office here in the United States is working with according to the rules governing the association. I am asking the United States government, because the United States government has the authority to do so. Because if United Nations has acted accordingly and swiftly, respond appropriately related to the crisis that is going on in Southern Cameroon, Southern Cameroon is still a United Nations trusted territory. Because since United Nations hasn't accomplished its mission of providing a transfer of sound democracy, after the British mission has indicated that the Southern Cameroon were not ready at the time they were proclaiming its independence, then the British also need to come up and defend the Southern Cameroon territory, because the people has risen. The people no longer depend on La République to be the architect of the Southern Cameroon territory. So I am asking the United States government, because the United States government has the authority to do so. Because when you imagine a United Nations office here in the United States, the United Nations office here in the United States has failed completely. When you have a United Nations crisis going on in the Southern Cameroon territory, as it's almost a year, United Nations hasn't dispatched any delegation to the Southern Cameroon territory to investigate. Southern Cameroon is not an ethnic crisis. Southern Cameroon is not an ethnic crisis. Southern Cameroon is a sovereign nation. Southern Cameroon is part of the United Nations trusted territory that British were preparing for immediate independence. And so the crisis that is going on, it is the United Nations responsibility to dispatch a delegation to investigate exactly the atrocity that is happening in the Southern Cameroon. La République has no legal authority over the people of Southern Cameroon. And so United Nations has exercised some responsibility by dispatching its own representative to investigate. But because Antonio Guterres, the current Secretary General of the United Nations, when he traveled to La République or to Central African Republic on his way to the Southern Cameroon, and he traveled to Central African Republic where there is another crisis going on there. You know, there is another crisis going on in Central African Republic, and the United Nations, because of the bribing and corruption. Imagine United Nations, instead of sending an investigation, is asking the country that is carrying on the atrocity to investigate itself. It's like going to the jail and ask, rather than sending a, when there is, let's take for example the crisis here in the United States. Instead of the United States government sent an investigator to investigate, United States asked the perpetrator to investigate itself. You ask the perpetrator to investigate itself. That is exactly what is happening in the United Nations. United Nations to send United Nations delegation to investigate whether there is a crime in humanity against the people of Southern Cameroon. Southern Cameroon is a sovereign nation. Southern Cameroon is a self-identity. Southern Cameroon is regarded as a nation. According to this article, I am not the author of this article. At least 64 nations voted for the Southern Cameroon sovereignty. And if the people of Southern Cameroon and at least 60,000 refugees is in Nigeria, that should have warranted the United Nations to send a delegation to investigate, instead asking the perpetrator to investigate itself. How will you get a good account when you ask the perpetrator to investigate itself and get an account? If you ask me to investigate myself, do you think I am going to give you a good account of what I have identified until you have a neutral body to investigate? Let me give you a typical scenario. When the United States asked that Russia was immediately in the United States elections, they appointed an investigator. United States, they appointed an independent investigator. That investigator is investigating whether actually did the Russia meddling in the internal affairs of the United States. And that is the purpose of that body that is investigating. When United Nations asked the perpetrator, imagine United States asked Russia to investigate and report to the United States. How do you expect Russia to investigate a crime they believe they committed in the United States election? I mean, it's very, very unfortunate that we have a coward living in the United Nations. Because when if United States said they were meddling in the United States election, that Russia were meddling in the United States election, and United States invite Russia to investigate its crime that it was meddling in the United States election, will Russia provide a meaningful result that they were meddling in the democratic process in the United States? Do you expect that account to be meaningful? That is why I am giving this clear analysis that when United Nations asked the dictatorship to investigate itself and report to the United Nations, I am kind of wondering whether if the United Nations has a sound mind to ask Paul Biya, the perpetrator, to investigate itself and report to the United Nations. As I'm speaking, there are at least 60,000 Southern Cameroon. Southern Cameroon is no longer the property of La République. La République has no legitimacy over the Southern Cameroon territory. Southern Cameroon is a sovereign nation, and Southern Cameroon has the duty to defend itself against any foreign aggressor. And therefore, we are asking the British government to take its responsibility and accomplish its mission, because Southern Cameroon is a sovereign nation. And if Southern Cameroon is a sovereign nation, the Great Britain need to defend that title at the United Nations, because we have a United Nations that is led by mentally challenged individuals that lack credibility to acknowledge the difference between reality and unreality. Because if the United Nations ask Paul Biya to investigate itself and report to the United Nations, then I am kind of wondering whether the competency of the United Nations Secretary General and any other world in the world, they may have been going through this major crisis because of the incompetency of the United Nations to send a delegation to investigate exactly and report to the United Nations body. Because Africa is actually affected because they have a France that is the veto power in the United Nations, and Africa doesn't have a veto power in the United Nations. And that is why the atrocity that is happening in Africa, because Africa is voiceless in the United Nations. And not only that, the African continent is a bizarre. And I am asking the president of Ghana to immediately and unconditionally convert a new leadership of African continent to define the rule of Africa, because Africa is in a deep mess. So it's time for the Ghanaian president to convert a new, different era of African leadership. And when they convert those leadership, it should be a prerequisite for democratization of Africa. Rather than having this evil dictatorship that has been in power, there must be a security policy that is in place and that must be ratified by all the African continent to indicate that they are ready to submit to a meaningful democracy, and that dictatorship will not be allowed in African continent. Ghanaian president need to redefine what is an African continent. Until then, we're gonna live in this mess. The world has moved to economic prosperity, but Africa still remains relegated to the worst level. Maybe democracy has not been prevailed. Maybe they haven't studied. But I believe that the current generation of African descent have a clear picture of exactly what peaceful democracy must be the ruling core of all African continent. If you are watching and you know that you can relate this message to the Ghanaian, call all conference for all Africa that practice democracy, and that they need to redefine Africa continent, and the African continent must change, and that France hegemony must be break away, and that France become a business partner. France cannot become a dictatorship, and France cannot dictate what has to happen to Africa, but France must come as a business partner of the African continent, because the era of destruction has gone. No Africa goes to France to carry on destruction. During election in France, Africans do not participate. Why must France decide what has to happen in Africa? I am here, open the eyes of the brutal dictatorship that are languishing now in Africa, that Africa must emerge as a superior nation. Many of the African leaders, some have studied here in the United States, some have studied in all the best universities, but each time they return to Africa, they erase what they have studied, and they erase the law, the rule of law. They erase and they reconstitute a new era of defraud rather than meaningful democracy. It seems like they've been brainwashed as soon as they leave the advanced world. But I am here to re-echo the message that the Ghanaian president must lead that torch and move Africa out of the brutal era of dictatorship to a new era, because this Africa must redefine itself. And that is why I am presenting this case to the Ghanaian president and those that may have a relationship. People on earth has a transition period, and each period is defined what you must accomplish on this earth. But a certain individual will prevent you to become the leadership to the affected world. But you have a job to accomplish. If there is a level of playing field, then we will have that opportunity to deliver that playing field. But many people are dying because the level of playing field are restrictable for certain individuals. But we must break the barrier of that restricted playing field so that everyone can drive through the playing field. And so we will realize that we have lived the world that God was actually defined. Another place that I'm going to drift to is the people of Venezuela. The people of Venezuela is in South America. The people of Venezuela are in South America. They lived through the era of communism. And as the people of Venezuela lived through the era of communism, and when the collapse of communism, they don't know exactly where to go. And that is why the certain group, they call themselves, they are the elites. Because the elites has no defined moment for the people of Venezuela. And now the people of Venezuela are living in a brutal hunger. This is the good news that the people of Venezuela have. They don't need to depend on the United Nations to define their sovereignty as the people of Southern Cameroon. The people of Venezuela is a nation in South America. They have been living from one brutal dictatorship to the next brutal dictatorship. And they suppress the liberty of people. And that the people who are aspiring to liberate the people of Venezuela has been disrupted. And those leaders have been placed in jail. But I have a good news to tell the people of Venezuela, that you must rise against the brutal dictatorship, and that the military wing of the Venezuela need to calm down and protect the innocent citizens and allow those individuals that have a vision for the people of Venezuela to arise and be able to stand and defend the liberty of the people of Venezuela. They don't need United Nations to stand and declare them, but they need United Nations is out of the question. But the people of Venezuela, the government, the military, you have the gun to protect the people of Venezuela and allow the people of Venezuela. Do not arrest them and place them in jail. Allow them and protect them. Give a meaningful playing field. They will define the economic policy of Venezuela, and that the people of Venezuela will rise and then become one of the great nations. Only if you allow a meaningful democracy to prevail in Venezuela. Many of you may have studied here in the United States. Many of you have been studying in the other great nations of the world. Many of you have aspired. But if the military wing continue to prevent you from progressing, then you're going to end in a chaotic scene. You have to learn that the government needs to go through a restructure. The government needs to allow a meaningful democracy, not the democracy for the elite. A meaningful democracy, which means everyone, an individual of the Venezuela, can rise and stand for a meaningful democracy. And that is the way forward. By suppressing those individuals and place them in jail is limiting the potential of the people of Venezuela. I have a good news for the people of Venezuela, that until you organize this formula and allow everyone, no restriction, and then a major leader will rise and bring the country from the era of hunger to the era of prosperity. And now back to the Southern Cameroon territory. You know, the military, the purpose of military was to protect the citizens of the indigenous of a nation. And that exercise was done by Mugabe. When the military wing stood up and told Mugabe, it's time for you to leave. And he immediately left peacefully. And he is now in his residency. The people of Zimbabwe, when the military that actually represent the people, they stand up for the freedom of the people, because the purpose of the military is to protect the citizens. When the military wing of La Republique is invading the Southern Cameroon territory against one single individual that worth nothing to the rest of the Southern to La Republique, I think the military need to exercise that caution as they did against Mugabe. Why the military are so confused, they lack action, they lack defined moment to realize that the people are more powerful than a single individual. The military of La Republique, they sent you, you carry on guns and bullets, and you walk to the Southern Cameroon territory and murder innocent civilians, and you slaughtering them, and you don't have in the back of your mind, who is sending me and who is he by the way? One single individual, Paul Biya, the wasteful expenditure of La Republique, and he will dispatch you, and you have your blockhead like a dragonfly, and you carry on gun, and that you've been directed. Human has intelligence. There is a difference between human being and animal. Human being has artificial intelligence, which means they can reason, they can make judgment, they can define yes and they can define no. And the military wing of La Republique, they are like a robotic machine. But robotic machine has artificial intelligence that are able to make judgment. But La Republique is made up of a robotic that the artificial intelligence has been removed. And that is why they're just going like a figurehead. And where they've been tapped to go, they just go simply. They can't even realize that Paul Biya worth nothing to the people of La Republique than the 100 youth citizens that are being murdered, that they have lives they need to build, they have a family they need to build. Yet they don't see that Paul Biya is more of a trouble than the people they are to protect. When military lack defining moment to understand the value of the civilian population, that when the civilian population stand up or define themselves, it is the duty of the military to stand with the people, because the people have a more potential than a single individual called Paul Biya. When the military put on cascade like the graveyard in a devil movie, I am wondering whether does the military have a mind? Because they have an artificial intelligence, but in this military wing of La Republique, the artificial intelligence has been removed. Because they have removed the artificial intelligence, they no longer function as like robotic machine. They have no mind, because people that have judgment, like the people of Zimbabwe, When they told Mugabe that it's time for you to go, he had no choice, but he left. No single soul was killed. No, there was no evil. Instead, the army rejoiced with the people, and the army stood firmly. They rejoiced with the people of Zimbabwe. Today, the people of Zimbabwe are moving forward. But the military wing of La Republique, they have no artificial intelligence. They have been the military of the workforce. They are sending you, and you carry ammunition, and you travel to execute your own brother. You think you are doing the right thing. We have a good news that the time has come and gone, and that the era the people must rise against the evildoers. When Robert Mugabe insists that he has to stay, he has to use the white has to become the next president. That is, look, a nation is a nation that is governed by the people. It's not governed by a separate, but the elites. No, it's governed by the people. The people have the power to lead, to choose who to lead them. And the people must, the military must stand with the people rather than stand with the self-individual. And that exercise was done by the military wing of the Robert Mugabe. They stood up and said, I have a good news for you, Mr. President. You must leave because the people need some refreshment. And the president said, no, I am not. You must leave because that is the wishes of the people. And when the people stood, the military stand with the people. And now the people are rejoicing. There was not a single soul that was lost. But in La Republique, it's not a difference. La Republique instead rejoiced with the brutal evil against the wishes of the people whom they were supposed to protect. And yet, people are being slaughtered. When you imagine a wife seeing his husband being slaughtered like an antelope, when a man, a wife seeing a husband being slaughtered like a sheepgoat, when a wife seeing a husband being slaughtered like the buffalo, when a wife seeing her husband being slaughtered into pieces in her front, I can imagine the world the people of Southern Cameroon are living in, because they have the evils of La Republique. And yet we have a world body here called the United Nations remain silent. Though the images have been posted, but United Nations remains silent. I am calling on the United States government to stand up for humanity. I believe in the United States government. I believe in the Congress. I believe in the U.S. Senate. I believe in the U.S. Department of Defense. I believe in all areas of the United States government. That United States government needs to stand against the brutal evil dictatorship and in the rest of the world. Because when you see those images, it really inflict an internal pain. You kind of wonder what can you do. But I believe the government the government of the United States has the power to do something. United States did not become a leader of the rest of the world. It was a God-given potential for this great nation of the United States that they must lead the freedom of the rest of the world. And when United States stand and ignore the reality, I am kind of wondering who should the United States protect, because United States government is the government that was created by God and it makes it to protect the rest of the world. And that is why the world peace has maintained to this rest of this moment. And so I am asking the United States government to please intervene and ask the people of Southern Cameroon to become a free democratic nation. I cannot longer emphasize more than I can, but I believe that the government of the United States has a duty to protect the civilian population and those that are aspiring to become a meaningful nation. When the United States voted in the sovereignty of Southern Cameroon in this article, they did not make a mistake. And United Nations office is here in New York. A United States State Department call to United Nations, it make a difference for the people of Southern Cameroon. A United States Congress called to the United Nations and make a difference to the people of Southern Cameroon. A U.S. governor called to the United Nations and make a difference for the people of Southern Cameroon. A United States citizens call to the United Nations and make a difference to the people of Southern Cameroon. I am asking the people of Southern Cameroon that the United States government has a duty to do something. The people of the United States, the peace-loving people of the United States, stand against the brutality of the evils of La Republique, against the freedom of Southern Cameroon. Right now that I'm speaking, at least the leadership, the entire cabinet of the Southern Cameroon has been adopted, and yet we don't know exactly where they are. But the United Nations, which is the office here, stay silent over the issues because they have been bribed. Because you can imagine someone traveling to investigate and he was awarded a gold and he returned with a gold. Then you can imagine what kind of productive response can come over from him. And that is why I am calling on the United States to investigate the United Nations Secretary General. I am calling on the United States government because the United States government is the government that I believe is the government that has authority to do something. The United States government has the power to do something. And if they know that the reality and people are being murdered, I remember when Bill Clinton stand against the people of Kosovo, stand for the people of Kosovo. Bill Clinton said, I will not on my watch to see the people of Kosovo. And he immediately take action against the perpetrator, against the people of Kosovo. Today, Kosovo is a free nation. They are able to exercise their duty. That is why the Southern Cameroon is looking for that similar action of the United States. Southern Cameroon is a sovereign nation. United States voted as a sovereign nation, recognize the people of Southern Cameroon as a sovereign nation. And it is time the Secretary General of the Secretary of State for the United States, the U.S. Congress, make call to the United Nations, and all members of the United States government call. Our taxes money are used to fund the United Nations, and yet brutality. Because when peace and democracy preserve, there is a unity among people. But when United Nations fail in its obligations to respect the peace and security, instead stand with the evildoers, then that becomes a concern for the rest of the world. And I imagine for his ability to exercise his duty in the rest of the world. So I am calling on the U.S. Congress to investigate United Nations. I am calling on the U.S. President to investigate United Nations. I am calling on U.S. Department of Defense to investigate United Nations. I am calling, if the ambassador of the United States in La Republique is not giving account of what is happening in the Southern Cameroon territory, I believe we have a lot of ambassadors that can be sent there that will stand for the freedom of people, because the United States is a God-given nation that stands for human freedom, and God did not make a mistake to stand. You choose United States as the country of liberty, the country of freedom, the country where liberty prevails. And the people of Southern Cameroon are arising and asking for that help. And yet, United States don't remain silent, because as the people are being murdered, imagine a wife seeing the husband being slaughtered at his own presence by the evil of La Republique army. I am wondering, where can I ask for help? If the Lord God says, seek for help, and the rest shall be added unto you. I am asking the United States government, do something. If the United Nations has responded promptly and respect this memorandum, this article that granted the sovereignty of Southern Cameroon, and asked La Republique to relinquish its power from the Southern Cameroon territory, we wouldn't have had at least 50,000 refugees in Nigeria. We wouldn't have had at least 10,000 or 5,000 people that have been executed. The area is smelling and stinking because of evil, brutal murder of the Southern Cameroon territory. And yet the United Nations is still asking La Republique to investigate itself. It is quite amazing. It is. It is. It is. It is. It is horrible. It is. It is horrible. It is horrible. It is horrible. As I'm speaking, the people of Bakundu, as I'm speaking, the people of Bakassi, as I'm speaking, the people of Ngolo, as I'm speaking, the people of Melima, as I'm speaking, the people of Tombe, as I'm speaking, there is ongoing shoplifting, there's ongoing embezzlement. The business authority, the businessmen and the businesswomen and the farmers and the properties are being dismantled, are being shoplifted. And the people, I mean, it is ongoing genocide in the people of Southern Cameroon. And when you go to the people of, when you go to the people of Oku, the people of Banso, the people of, I mean, there is ongoing destruction of the property. The house are being burnt, and it's a chaotic thing that that is happening in the Southern Cameroon territory, and no major media is able to present this case. But I am asking the United States government to do something about it. I am asking the State Department to do something about it, because they have the duty. God has given these nations the power to be able to stand against any place in the world. And if God did not make a mistake to choose the United States as a leader of the free world, and if the United States is a leader of the free world, they must exercise that power, and that the people must be free. La République, a single letter from the United States Department to La République that they need to vacate the Southern Cameroon territory within 24 hours. They will respect that immediately. But the United States, how many people should be slaughtered before that letter should be sent to La République? United Nations has failed incompletely. I think United Nations need to be replaced completely. The entire system of the United Nations need to be replaced, because it's absolutely not accountable. Because when they stood for bribing and corruption, rather than the duty that it is intended to protect human dignity, then I think the United States has the power to do that. You know, the World FIFA, the FIFA World Cup body, United States investigate, and some of them are in jail. And today, FIFA now is a different body. And I think the United States can do that with the United Nations. Arrest them and dump them in jail. And that until investigation, find out exactly what is happening. And then we will have a body that represents the aspiration of the rest of the world. Today, the governors of the United States are celebrating with the Ghanaian president because he stood for freedom. And if the United States see the emerging freedom of nations in Africa, I think the United States government need to proceed in that direction. I want to take a moment to thank you for having the opportunity to watch me live. But I believe that we can stand together and fight the evils of bureaucracy that are against the freedom of nations. And I want to take a moment to thank you, and I wish you the rest of your day. It was Funto Daniel speaking here from the great state of Texas. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.